Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. On today's show we will be discussing popular music. But don't worry, we haven't gone soft in the head, because music and lyrics influence millions of people's lives without most of them even knowing it. We will be asking the question, is there a hidden agenda guiding and influencing some of today's most popular music artists? And if so, who is behind it and what are they trying to achieve? To discuss the subject, I am joined by literary academic Gemma King. Welcome, Gemma.
Hi, Richard.
Now, you're a university teacher. Can you start by telling us what your academic background is thus far?
Yeah, of course. Well, I started off with my first degree. I did the humanities with English literature and English language. And then when I moved on to my MA, I focused on the psychological effects of poetry, and also the psychological stimulation for poetry. Specifically, I looked at Sylvia Plath's work in relation to post-Lacanian theory, which is modified Freudian theory, basically. And then for my PhD, I moved on to looking at family psychology. I was looking at the poetess Frida Hughes in relation to her parents, Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes, and looking at how she interacted with how iconic they were within her work. And also I looked at celebrity theory, because Frida, who is the focus of my thesis, she's sort of the Peaches Geldof of the literary world. So,
Right.
So looking at these new concepts of celebrity psychological theory as well. So a lot of my work is involved in that.
So for all your literary in your academic field, a lot of it's to do with psychology.
Yeah, it's psychology focused. I mean, that's how I try and understand the layers within literature, is by looking at it through a psychological lens, really.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you've applied some of the skills and knowledge or analysis techniques that you've used to analyse poetry, to analyse popular music.
Yeah.
Although not in your academic sphere, this is something you've done in your sort of spare time.
Yeah, it's probably important to preface this by saying that I'm not an expert in music theory at all. Where I came to it, it was just something that I'd become interested in. With poetry, the psychology of it, and some say the science of it, you don't just look at the words that are being used, you also look at what you call the phonology of it, so the soundscape of a poem, how that affects you. So really I found that they mapped onto each other quite neatly, and I was able to kind of, formulate some theories and map on some stuff that I'd researched onto music.
Right.
Yeah.
And, can you just, for those people who don't know what psychology is, can you just give us a broad brush description?
Sure. Well, psychology, it's basically trying to understand the interactions between the unconscious and the conscious level of being human.
Right. And what do you mean by subconscious?
Well, I guess the easiest way to try and communicate that would be to say that it is a lower level of our consciousness.
Right.
And it's, the part that we access in dreams and things like that.
Right.
The part that subliminal messages and that kind of thing can access.
So there's certain things within poetry that get into your deeper subconscious that you're not really aware of, and you would contend that there are themes in popular music which are becoming parts of people's subconscious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, before we actually, because we're going to talk about some artists, but before we do that, we were talking about the Tavistock Institute, which is a group, based in the UK, but it has its tentacles in various other academic establishments. And can you tell us a little bit about the Tavistock Institute, specifically in relation to music?
Yeah, sure. Well, Tavistock was set up in 1921. They were funded partially by the Rockefellers. I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know a lot about the Rockefellers. And they aim to manipulate through social crisis. They're generally seen as the nerve centre for global manipulation. and music is just one arm of that. They have many different arms. They're connected to Stanford in the USA, to MIT, to NASA, all these different organisations.
And you were telling me earlier that you think that we were talking about different artists, different popular icons in music, such as, I mean, we mentioned Britney Spears when Neil Sanders was on talking about this type of thing. But you even think that the Beatles were actually in some way a constructed by Tavistock? Is that, can you?
Yeah, well, my research, I would point people in the direction of the research of Dr. Jonathan Coleman, who he claims he was an ex-MI6 intelligence agent. And also there's another researcher called Alan Watt. He looks into esoteric matters, and he looks into the causative effects, the causative reasons behind large social change. So mass social change, basically. So their work, they've really looked into the Beatles, and yeah, what they've come up with is that Tavistock manufactured them.
Right. So what about Beatles fans who would say, "Come on, these are the two of the most talented songwriters of all time"? Do you dispute that? I mean, were they actually which were they writing their lyrics, or were they writing their songs, or? Well, how does that work?
Yeah, well, all of the research, really, it goes back to one man called Theodore Adorno. Theodore Adorno was part of the Frankfurt School of Social Engineering. Alan Watt contends that he was thrown out of Germany for playing with children's minds through music.
What sort of year we're talking about here, Gemma?
I think this was about the 30s, 40s,
right.
That kind of
Okay.
period. Yeah, so the Frankfurt School, they had really unclear aims. People didn't really know what they were doing, but how they decided to achieve this. They wanted to bring about some kind of social change. They didn't clarify what that was.
Right.
But what they said, they wanted to promote excessive drinking, homophobia, the loss of the alpha male in a family situation, reliance on social welfare, these kinds of things.
Right.
So this is Theodore Adorno's background. So he was thrown out of Germany, out of the Frankfurt School, was put up in Britain by the British royal family.
Right.
He was big friends with the Queen of England. He was then invited to, or he was employed by the Tavistock Institute, because he also had a strong background in music. So they really wanted to utilise that as part of their programmes for social change. So what he had developed was called a 12-tone atonal system, and it's a system that he developed as part of the Frankfurt School, but also as part of a strange cult in Germany called the Dionysian, and it was to tap into lower levels of the subconscious, basically. So he allegedly, according to Dr. Coleman and Alan Watt, apparently he wrote all the music for the Beatles. Yes.
Beatles music.
Yes.
Okay.
Apparently he wrote the lyrics and the music. And their main proof of this is that Theodore Adorno owned all the copyright to the Beatles catalogue until just recently.
Right.
And Paul McCartney tried to get it, and Michael Jackson got it eventually. So that's what they claim.
So this 12, what did you call it? The 12
atonal system.
Atonal system. That's not to do with lyrics. That's music.
Yeah, that's purely the phonology of it. That's purely the soundscape.
And does only the Beatles music use that system, or is this more widely used?
No. Well, it is more widely used.
Right.
It's used in hip hop music now.
Right.
Which I think we'll go on to later.
Right.
I mean, I'm not too sure about what happened in the 80s and things like that, but I know that Adorno applied them to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does this musical system achieve then?
Well, Adorno claimed that these are his own words, that this system would have corrosive effects on the mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned also the Rolling Stones. You think that they were both constructed or being controlled and manipulated in some way?
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is where the research of Dr. Coleman, that's where it led him, and he believed that they were both put out there. So the Rolling Stones were the bad boys of music, and the Beatles were the good boys of music.
Right. And the reason for having the bad and good would be what?
Well, I think you know, you can only guess at that. But my own personal feeling on it is that if it's true, it's probably just so that they've got two arms to control. You know, instead of just having one person out in you know, in the media that is disseminating their message.
Now, obviously, John Lennon was a very influential person, and you know, he was assassinated, and we were talking also about Yoko Ono. There are theories about Yoko Ono's influence over Lennon. Can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff there, and this goes back onto what Neil Sanders was talking about in your previous shows about the Monarch programme. Because if you have if you're part of the Monarch programme, you need a handler, and you're psychologically manipulated to be an instrument of whatever this organisation is. And the theory is that Yoko Ono was John Lennon's handler, and when he was about to break away from Tavistock and the negative effects that they were having, he was paired up with Yoko Ono, who comes from you know, a very strong Japanese dynasty. Her mother is aristocracy and her father is a banker and all this kind of stuff. Really highly educated. And the thought is that, you know, she tried to promote him to do lots of strange stunts that would make people think that he'd lost his mind. So that when he was trying to say things about mind control, that perhaps he wouldn't be taken seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if we step up to the modern day then and just talk about Radio 1 for a second. You tell me about these lists that Radio 1 employ when they choose which songs are going to be on each show. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, this is, from what I've heard, Radio 1 have 3 lists. The first list has on it songs that they must play every hour. The second list is songs that they have to play at least every 2 hours. And the third list is what they have to play every 3 hours. So regardless of whoever the DJ is for that particular show, they have to, they're contracted to play what's on these lists with a certain frequency. And if you actually listen to the radio throughout the day, you hear the same handful of songs repeated constantly.
And, you know, in the past, the opposite of that would be people like John Peel, who sort of introduced bizarre music sometimes, and, you know, some of it was good, some of it wasn't so good. So you would say that the DJs on Radio 1 these days, they're not basically choosing the records at all?
It doesn't appear that they do, no. It appears that they're completely controlled by, you know, commercial venture and,
And would you say that the Tavistock has got a hand in the choices of records being put forward?
It's difficult to say, but I feel that there's definitely some controlling body, because there are certain artists that seem to, in my opinion, lack talent, that get promoted hugely, you know, across the board, on the radio, on the TV, in the magazines, in the newspapers. So there seems to be an overwhelming, overarching agenda there, certainly.
I mean, the counter-argument to the fact that all popular music is orchestrated and planned by people other than the artists, the counter-argument to that is, oh, well, we've got the internet, any band can launch themselves on the internet, they can make their own MP3s, and the band that's often cited is the Arctic Monkeys. They made themselves through the internet, and they didn't need a corporate backing. Can bands really make it by just using the internet, do you think?
In short, no. Because, I mean, you cited the Arctic Monkeys earlier when we were talking, and I haven't had a chance, haven't had time to go back and look at this original article that I saw last year, so I can't give you the facts, but look it up. The Arctic Monkeys, actually, there's a lot of kind of evidence out there that the bandwidth that they would have needed to actually showcase themselves to thousands and thousands of people, they didn't have it, so they were promoted by a company. But regardless of that, I think what we were just saying about the focus of the media on a very small minority of artists and giving them maximum exposure. If you are an independent artist standing against that and all you've got is your little pitch on MySpace, it's not impossible that you would make it, but it would be unlikely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And when I spoke to Neil Sanders, he showed a very interesting clip of Britney Spears, and he was suggesting that she is basically a victim of mind control from a child and was handpicked to be the next child star sort of thing,
Yeah.
or the star that children will look up to. And part of this mind control is allegedly creating alters or multiple personalities. He said that a lot of these artists have either multiple personality disorders or they have a stage persona which is completely different to their own.
Yeah.
And the clip that we're going to repeat is Britney Spears, where she appears to suddenly change personality and then flip back into it.
Yeah.
So we'll just take a quick look at that, Gemma, and then I can get you to comment on it.
You've had a year that would test a lot of people. Illness in the family. A breakup. This spasm of publicity about what happened from Mexico to London.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Strong Brittany. Yeah, it was a weird time. Ew. I'm embarrassed. Can we stop this?
Okay, so what do you make of that then, Gemma, in your expert opinion?
It's completely disturbing. I mean, there is definitely a switch there. I think when I watched Neil Sanders on your shows, that was the moment that really convinced me that there was something to this, because she just switches and you can tell she has no idea where she is. Yeah,
Right.
Really upsetting.
Okay, well, we're going to go for a short break now, Gemma, and
Okay.
after the break we're going to be discussing some of the modern pop groups of today.